Concerning the Great Sphinx of the Giza Plateau in Cairo, scientists believe that they have geological evidence which shows the Sphinx could be 800,000 years old. One of the most mysterious, enigmatic monuments on the surface of our planet is without a doubt the Great Sphinx at the Giza Plateau in Egypt. It's an ancient construction that has baffled researchers ever since its discovery, and until today, no one has been able to accurately date the Sphinx since there are no written records or mentions in the past about this. Now, we know that until about 1800s, it was buried up to its neck in the sand. Now, though, two Ukrainian researchers proposed a new provocative theory where the two scientists proposed that the Great Sphinx of Egypt is around 800,000 years old. It's a revolutionary theory that's backed up by science, though. The study was presented in the International Conference of Geoarcheology and Archaeomineralogy held in Sofia, titled Geological Aspect of the Problem of Dating the Great Sphinx, the Great Egyptian Sphinx Construction. The authors of the paper are scientists Manichev Vyacheslav, Institute of Environmental Geochemistry of the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine, and Alexander Parkhomenko, Institute of Geography of the National Academy of Sciences Ukraine. The starting point of these two experts is the paradigm shift initiated by West and Soch, a debate intended to overcome the orthodox view of Egyptology, referring to the possible remote origins of the Egyptian civilization, and on the other, physical evidence of water erosion present at the monuments of the Giza Plateau. Kindly support my Patreon account since YouTube has again demonetized my YouTube channel. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below. According to Manichev and Parkhomenko, the problem of dating the Great Egyptian Sphinx construction is still valid despite of long-term history of its research, geological approach in connection to other scientific and natural methods permits to answer the question about the relative age of the Sphinx. The conducted visual investigation of the Sphinx allowed the conclusion about the important role of water from large water bodies which partially flooded the monument with formation of wave-cut hollows on its vertical walls. The morphology of these formations has an analogy with similar such hollows formed by the sea in the coastal zones, genetic resemblance of the compared erosion forms and the geological structure and petrographic composition of sedimentary rock complexes lead to a conclusion that the decisive factor of destruction of the historic monument is the wave energy rather than sand abrasion in aeolian process, wind process that is. Voluminous geologic literature confirms the fact of existence of long-living freshwater lakes in various periods of the Quaternary from the lower Pleistocene to the Holocene. Let's remember that also shell artifacts were found embedded in the walls of the Sphinx, meaning that obviously there was water around it. It was bathed with water. Now, these lakes were distributed in the territories adjacent to the Nile River. The absolute mark of the upper large erosion hollow of the Sphinx corresponds to the level of water surface which took place in the early Pleistocene. The Great Egyptian Sphinx had already stood in the Giza Plateau by that geological historic timeline. A strong argument was made by Ukrainian scientists in regard of the Sphinx, arguments based upon geological studies which support Soch's view regarding the Sphinx and its age. Manichev and Parkhomenko focused on the deterioration aspect of the body of the Sphinx, leaving aside the erosive features where the Sphinx is located, which had been studied previously by Soch. Ukrainian scholars focused on the undulating terrain of the Sphinx, which displays the mysterious pattern. Mainstream scientists offer explanation for this sharp feature and state that it is based on the abrasive effect of the wind and sand. The undulations were formed because of the harder layers of rock are better at withstanding the erosion, while the softer layers would have been more effective, forming voids. However, as noted Manichev and Parkhomenko, this argument does not explain why the front of the head of the Sphinx lacks such features. In regard to the argument made by Soch about the heavy rain period, which occurred around 13,000 BC, let's remember about 13,000 BC was the Younger Dryas comet impact event. That event, of course, did the end with the Clovis culture, the culture in the North America, and also the woolly mammoths and the fauna and the flora. Now, the Ukrainian scientists recognize such hypothesis, partially suggesting that the erosion features of the Sphinx go back further than 13,000 BC. Manichev and Parkhomenko argue that argue is that the mountainous coastal areas of the Caucasus and Crimea, which they know well, have a type of wind erosion that differs morphologically to the erosion features noted on the Sphinx. Essentially, they argue that such wind erosion has a very soft effect, regardless of the geological compositions of the rocks. They said, in our geological field expeditions, in different mountains and littoral zones of the Crimean and Caucasus, we could often observe the forms of aeolian weathering, that's wind weathering, which morphology differs considerably from the weathering taking place on the GES, the Great Egyptian Sphinx. Most natural forms of weathering are of smooth character, independent of lithological composition of the rocks. And they explain, our personal experience in scientific investigation of geology of the sea coasts gives reasons to draw an analogy with the great Egyptian Sphinx and to suggest another mechanism of its destruction. Specialists and geologists who work in the field of seacoast geomorphology know such forms of relief as wave-cut hollows. They can be a one- and multi-story. They are arranged horizontally to the seawater surface if the coast makes a vertical wall, a cliff. Especially deep wave-cut hollows are formed in precipitous cliffs built by the strata of carbonaceous rocks. Such forms of the coast relief are well known and studied in detail on the Black Sea coast of the Caucasus and Crimea. General model of formation of the wave-cut hollows in the rocks of the Caucasus Flysch is given by Popov, 1953. In dynamics of the process of wave-cut hollows formation, one can notice such a characteristic feature that the wave energy is directed to the rock stratum at the level of water surface. Besides, both saline and fresh water can dissolve the rocks. Manichev and Parkhomenko proposed a new natural mechanism that may explain the undulations and mysterious features of the Sphinx. This mechanism is the impact of waves on the rocks of the coast. Basically, this could produce, in a period of thousands of years, the formation of one or more layers of ripples, a fact that is clearly visible, for example, on the shores of the Black Sea. This process, which acts horizontally, that is, when the waves hit the rock up to the surface, will produce a wear or dissolution of the rock. The fact is that the observation of these cavities in the Great Sphinx made the Ukraine scientists think that this great monument could have been affected by above said process in the context of immersion in large bodies of water, not the regular flooding of the Nile. Manichev and Parkhomenko suggest that the geological composition of the body of the Sphinx is a sequence of layers composed of limestone with small interlayers of clay. Manichev Parkhomenko explained that these rocks possess different degrees of resistance to the water effect and say that if the hollows formation were due to sand abrasion only, the hollows had to correspond to the strata of a certain lithological composition. They suggest that the Great Sphinx hollows are formed in fact within several strata or occupy part of the stratum of homogeneous composition. Manichev and Parkhomenko firmly believe the Sphinx had to be submerged for a long time underwater, and to support this hypothesis, they point towards existing literature of geological studies of the Giza Plateau. And according to these studies, at the end of the Pliocene geological period, that's between 5.2 and 1.6 million years ago, seawater entered the Nile Valley and gradually created flooding in the area. This led to formation of lacustrine deposits, which are at the mark of 180 meters above the present level of the Mediterranean Sea. That's about 600 feet above the Mediterranean sea level today. According to Manichev and Parkhomenko, it is the sea level during the Calabrian phase, which is the closest to the present mark with the highest GES, that is the Great Egyptian Sphinx Hollow, at its level. High level of seawater also caused the Nile to overflow and created long-living water bodies. As to time, it corresponds to 800,000 years ago. What we have here is evidence which contradicts the conventional theory of deterioration caused by sand and water, a theory already criticized by West and Schoch, who recalled that during many centuries, the body of the Sphinx was buried by the sands of the desert. So wind and sand erosion would not have done any damage to the enigmatic Sphinx because it was covered by sand. However, where Schoch clearly saw the action of the streams of water caused by continuous rains, Ukrainian geologists see the effect of erosion caused by the direct contact of the waters of the lakes formed in the Pleistocene on the body of the Sphinx. This means that the Great Sphinx of Egypt is one of the oldest monuments on the surface of our earth, pushing back drastically the origin of mankind and civilization. Some might say that the theory proposed by Manichev and Parkhomenko is very extreme because it places the Great Sphinx in an era where there were no humans according to currently accepted evolutionary patterns. Well, obviously there were. Now, furthermore, it's been demonstrated the two megalithic temples located adjacent to the Great Sphinx were built by the same stone, which means that the new dating of the Sphinx drags these monuments, that is the Giza pyramids, with the Sphinx back 800,000 years. In other words, this means that ancient civilizations inhabited our planet much longer than mainstream scientists are willing to accept. This is from Ancient Code here on Collective Comments on Humans Are Free. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support.